Imagine this. You wake up in a room you've lived in your entire life. The walls are lined with mirrors, floor to ceiling, and for years you've stared into them, studying your reflection. But today, something shifts. A hairline crack appears in one pane, and as you lean closer, the glass shatters. Not outward, but inward. Behind it lies another mirror, angled slightly differently, reflecting a version of yourself you don't recognize. Your posture is stiffer, your eyes vacant, your mouth moving as if rehearsing lines from a script you never read. You try to turn away, but every mirror in the room now reveals this stranger, whispering in unison, "This is who you've always been." Here's the unsettling truth. Most humans will die without ever truly meeting themselves. They'll spend decades nodding to rhythms they didn't choose, defending beliefs they didn't forge, and performing a pantomime of identity curated by forces they never dared to name. The paradox? We live in the most information-saturated age in history, yet genuine thought, raw, unfiltered, unborrowed, has never been rarer. Why? Why does the modern mind, armed with endless data and global connectivity, so willingly outsource its sovereignty? Consider Socrates, executed for teaching citizens to question their deepest assumptions, or Galileo silenced for daring to see what power insisted wasn't there. Today, the stakes are inverted. No tyrant needs to threaten us. We gag ourselves. We pay for the privilege of distraction, swipe through algorithmic sermons that preach our own biases back to us, and call this cacophony freedom. The average person checks their phone 144 times a day, yet cannot sit alone with their thoughts for 10 minutes without reaching for escape. What does this starvation of silence do to a mind's ability to think? Not react, not mimic, but originate? The contradiction cuts deeper. We're taught that knowledge is power, yet we confuse information with understanding, opinions with convictions, likes on a screen with validation of our worth. Schools train compliance, not curiosity. Algorithms profit by narrowing our worlds into echo chambers of predictability. Even our rebellions are branded, our dissent prepackaged. You claim to hate the system, but your rage fits neatly into a tweet. You demand authenticity, yet your identity is a collage of trends observed and personas adopted. Who or what is piloting your mind? This is not an accident. It is not a flaw. It is a feature of the human condition, amplified by systems that thrive on your passivity. From birth, you've been handed maps drawn by others, religions, ideologies, cultural norms, the silent expectations of parents and peers. To think for yourself, you must first burn every map and wander naked into the wilderness of uncertainty. But here's the terror few admit. Most would rather live in chains than risk the vertigo of freedom. The German philosopher Erich Fromm called this the escape from freedom, the desperate retreat into authoritarianism, conformity, or numbness when faced with the burden of self-determination. Ask yourself, really ask, when was the last time you had an idea that didn't echo something you'd read, seen, or heard? When did you last change your mind about something fundamental, not because someone convinced you, but because you dared to interrogate your own certainty? The discomfort of these questions is the point. It's easier to die mentally at 25 and bury yourself in rituals until they carry your coffin than to endure the daily death of your illusions. But beneath this bleakness lies a silent rebellion. For scattered among the cognitive marionettes are those who've glimpsed the crack in the mirror, the ones who've felt the itch of an unlived life, who hear the dissonance between the self they perform and the self they sense pulsing beneath the facade. They are the exceptions, the outliers, the maddening few who refuse to let their minds become rented property. Their existence proves the lie. Thinking for yourself is not impossible. It's just violently, exquisitely costly. So we arrive at the great question, the one that will claw at your ribs long after these words fade. Are you a spectator of your own mind or its master? The answer will not be found in platitudes or self-help mantras. It lives in the shadow realm where psychology, philosophy, and the raw mechanics of power collide, a realm we're about to enter. But first, we must name the invisible jailers. You've seen the crack in the mirror. Now, step closer. Peer into the fractured glass, past the rehearsed smiles and borrowed convictions, and you'll find the architects of your mental captivity. They are not conspirators in shadowy boardrooms or dictators in bunkers. They are far more intimate, far more insidious. They are the parts of you that would rather kneel than stand. Let's name them. The first jailer, the tyranny of the tribe. For 300,000 years, survival depended on belonging. To be cast out was death. Evolution hardwired your brain to prioritize acceptance over truth, consensus over clarity. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, the primal terror of becoming the one who is different. Modernity hasn't erased this code, it's weaponized it. Social media platforms didn't invent the fear of exclusion, they monetized it. Every like, share, and follower count taps into a neurological slot machine, rewarding conformity with dopamine and punishing dissent with the silent violence of invisibility. You don't choose your opinions, you survive them. But there's a second jailer, more cunning still. The illusion of certainty. The human mind craves answers like a parched tongue craves water, yet it will drink poison if labeled truth. Cognitive dissonance, the mental agony of holding conflicting ideas, is so intolerable that we contort reality to avoid it. Carl Jung saw this in the shadow self, the parts of our psyche we disown to maintain the fiction of coherence. You cling to political dogmas, religious absolutes, even scientific certainties, not because they're true, but because they spare you the vertigo of ambiguity. The French philosopher Blaise Pascal understood this when he wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Add a third jailer, the cult of comfort. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World envisioned a dystopia not of pain but of pleasure. A society pacified by distraction where people come to love their oppression. Your world is softer but no less sinister. Algorithms feed you content that flatters your biases. Consumer culture sells you identities like seasonal fashions. Even spirituality becomes a self-help commodity, promising enlightenment in 5 easy steps. The message is clear. Don't think. Consume. Don't question. Click. Schopenhauer called this the will's endless striving, the way desire chains us to cycles of want and satiation. A hamster wheel mistaken for a throne. Yet none of these forces would hold power without the keystone jailer. The fear of existential aloneness. To think for yourself is to accept that no one, not a god, a leader, a tribe, or a tradition, can absolve you of the burden of meaning. Jean-Paul Sartre called this condemnation to freedom. Viktor Frankl, surviving Auschwitz, saw it in the inverse. Those who found purpose in hellish conditions did so only by confronting the void head-on. But here's the rub. Most would rather outsource their souls than face this abyss. Religion says, bow and we'll tell you why you exist. Nationalism says, serve and we'll give you glory. Capitalism says, buy and we'll sell you worth. These are not conspiracies. They are Faustian bargains, and you sign them in blood every time you trade a question for a slogan. But why does this matter? Because your brain is not a passive victim, it's a collaborator. Neuroscience reveals that the default mode network, the brain region active during self-reflection, physically atrophies when deprived of deep focus. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the seat of fear, grows louder with every headline, tweet, and alert, keeping you in a state of perpetual threat. You're not just being manipulated, you're being rewired. The Roman Stoic Seneca warned of this 2,000 years ago. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. Yet here you are, scrolling through infinity, fragmenting your attention into 1,000 anxious shards, each too brittle to bear the weight of a single original thought. The great delusion? Believing you're immune. The educated scoff at flat earthers but swallow partisan narratives with identical fervor. The spiritual dismiss dogma while parroting gurus who preach non-attachment from gold-plated thrones. Even rebellion becomes a pose. A Che Guevara t-shirt bought off Amazon, a punk aesthetic sanitized for mass consumption. You mistake reaction for revolution, never noticing that your defiance moves within grooves carved by the very system you claim to reject. The German poet Rilke saw this clearly. Beware of letting yourself become a mere vehicle for trends. And so we arrive at the heart of the trap. Thinking for yourself requires dismantling the lies you've mistaken for yourself. Jung's shadow, Nietzsche's will to power, Frankl's search for meaning, they all point to the same harrowing truth. Authenticity is a war against evolutionary instincts, cultural programming, and the seductive ease of living secondhand. It's why Soren Kierkegaard declared, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing." But here's the spark of hope. Jailers can be overthrown. Every system of control, biological, psychological, societal, contains the seeds of its own undoing. The question is not whether you're capable of thinking freely, but whether you're willing to endure the death of every comforting lie that's kept you small. The mirrors are shattering. The cracks are spreading. What you do next will determine whether you live as a prisoner or become something far more dangerous. You've met the jailers. Now witness the trial. This is not a courtroom with gavels and verdicts, but a silent, ceaseless erosion, a corrosion of the mind so gradual you mistake it for growth. The consequences of not thinking for yourself are not dramatic collapses, but slow, invisible suffocations. They unfold in the quiet hours, in the choices you don't remember making, the beliefs you never chose to hold, the life you'll one day realize you didn't live. Let's begin with the most intimate casualty: the death of authentic desire. From childhood, you're taught to want what others want: prestige, security, approval. But beneath these borrowed cravings lies a deeper hunger, a primal urge to create rather than consume, to explore rather than mimic. Psychologists call this the authentic self, but it's more accurate to call it the self that could have been. Every time you silence a question to fit in, every time you swallow a dream to meet expectations, you bury that self deeper. Over decades, this creates what Kierkegaard termed the despair of not wanting to be oneself. A life lived as a forgery, haunted by the ghost of what you never dared to become. Civilization doesn't just stagnate, it regresses. Now, zoom out. See the societal rot. When masses outsource their thinking, history's darkest chapters weren't born from evil alone, but from the unthinking complicity of ordinary people. Hannah Arendt, studying the banality of evil in Nazi Germany, observed that atrocities require not monsters but thoughtless individuals, those who obey without reflection. Today's threats are subtler but no less dire. Algorithmic echo chambers radicalize not through force but through comfort, feeding users increasingly extreme content to keep them engaged. Climate denial, conspiracy theories, xenophobia, they thrive not because humans are inherently cruel, but because an unthinking mind defaults to fear, tribalism, and the path of least resistance. The neurological toll is even more insidious. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means your habits of thought literally shape your biology. Endless scrolling, multitasking, and consuming pre-digested ideas atrophy the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for critical thinking and self-regulation. Meanwhile, the brain's reward system becomes addicted to novelty and validation, leaving you perpetually restless, perpetually empty. This isn't metaphor. fMRI studies reveal that heavy social media users exhibit neural patterns similar to substance abusers. Dopamine spikes followed by crashes, cravings, and withdrawal. But you're not just distracted, you're being unmade. But the greatest tragedy lies in the illusion of agency. You believe you're choosing your life, your career, your politics, your values. Yet how many of these choices are reactions to invisible scripts? Consider the mere exposure effect. We prefer what's familiar, even if it's harmful. Corporations exploit this, flooding your environment with logos, slogans, and lifestyles until you mistake brand loyalty for identity. Political parties weaponize it, framing issues not as debates but as tribal markers. You defend positions you've never examined, not out of conviction, but because opposing them would mean exile from your chosen group. This is what Sartre meant by bad faith. Surrendering your freedom to the anesthesia of roles and rules. Even your perception of time bends to this unthinking spell. The ancient Greeks had two words for time: chronos, clock time, and kairos, the opportune moment. Modernity has erased kairos. You're trapped in chronos, a treadmill of deadlines, notifications, and artificial urgency, while the moments that could have defined your life slip by unnoticed. The Japanese call this karoshi, death by overwork, but it's broader than that. It's death by distraction, by fragmentation, by 1,000 petty demands that leave no room for the questions that matter. And what of love? Relationships too fall victim. Without self-awareness, you project unmet needs onto partners, replay childhood wounds, and call this chaos passion. The psychologist Erich Fromm warned that most people mistake dependency for love. They crave fusion to escape the terror of aloneness. But real love requires two sovereign selves, and sovereignty demands thinking. How many relationships wither because neither person dared to ask, "Who am I? What do I truly want?" The cultural fallout is no less bleak. Art becomes content. Philosophy becomes self-help. Religion becomes tribalism. Education becomes job training. The French sociologist Émile Durkheim called this anomie, a society's collapse into normlessness, where individuals, untethered from shared meaning, drift into alienation and despair. You see it in rising suicide rates, opioid epidemics, and the hollow eyes of influencers peddling authenticity like a cheap product. A culture that doesn't think collectively becomes a marketplace of disconnected souls, bartering distraction for oblivion. Yet the most chilling consequence is the theft of legacy. When you outsource your mind, you don't just rob yourself, you rob future generations. Children learn not by lectures, but by osmosis, absorbing your habits of thought like secondhand smoke. If you avoid hard questions, they'll inherit your fears. If you chase validation, they'll internalize your emptiness. The 20th century philosopher Isaiah Berlin warned of the counter-enlightenment, a regression into irrationalism and authoritarianism, when critical thinking falls dormant. Today, watch it bloom. Schools remove philosophy from curricula, media reduces discourse to sound bites, and leaders rise not on ideas but on vibes. You are leaving them a world where thought itself is suspect. But here's the twist. These consequences are not punishments, they're choices. The German poet Hölderlin wrote, "Where danger grows, so too does saving power." The very systems that suppress thought also contain the keys to liberation. Algorithms can be hacked. Neuroplasticity can be redirected. The same brain that defaults to conformity can be trained to crave curiosity. The question is no longer what is being taken from you. It's why you keep letting it happen. The trial is over. The sentence is being carried out. But escape is still possible, if you're willing to confront the final, most terrifying truth. But how? Start by rewiring your brain's addiction to certainty. Neuroplasticity is your ally here. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you sit with a question instead of Googling it, you starve the amygdala's hunger for quick fixes and feed the prefrontal cortex's capacity for depth. The French philosopher Michel Foucault practiced this as critical ontology, interrogating not just ideas, but how you came to believe them. Try this. Next time you feel rage at a headline, ask, what if the opposite is true? Next time you're certain of someone's guilt, ask, what if they're a mirror for my own shadows? This isn't naivety, it's intellectual jujitsu. using the weight of conditioning against itself. Now, the second paradox: to escape the tribe, you must find a deeper tribe. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust by connecting with others who shared his commitment to meaning, even in hell. The Underground Railroad wasn't built by lone rebels, but by networks of dissenters who whispered freedom into the dark. Today, your tribe might be a book club dissecting banned literature, an online forum rejecting algorithmic feeds, or a silent meditation retreat where phones are shattered on arrival. The 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza, excommunicated for heresy, ground lenses by day and rewrote metaphysics by night, surrounded by a clandestine circle of free thinkers. Find those who unsettle you, who crack your certainties like eggs, and you'll find the courage to think dangerously. Here's the third weapon: strategic stupidity. In a world that rewards performative intelligence, play the fool. Ask naive questions that expose emperor's new clothes truths. When everyone is arguing politics, ask, why do we accept a system that reduces us to left or right? When coworkers obsess over productivity hacks, ask, why are we optimizing ourselves into oblivion? The Danish physicist Niels Bohr hung a horseshoe over his door, for luck. When asked if he believed in superstition, he grinned. No, but I'm told it works even if you don't. Sometimes feigning ignorance is the sharpest scalpel, but rebellion demands more than mindset shifts. It requires rituals of friction. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, visualizing worst-case scenarios to inoculate against fear. You need modern equivalents. Delete all apps for a week and journal the withdrawal symptoms. Attend a rally for a cause you oppose and listen, truly listen, to someone's story. Fast from opinions. When the urge to speak arises, ask, is this mine to say, or am I parroting ghosts? The existentialist Simone de Beauvoir did this daily, writing in The Ethics of Ambiguity that freedom requires the will to disclose being through deliberate action. Create rituals that force you to collide with discomfort and watch the autopilot of conformity crumble. Now, the final and most radical act: reclaim your attention as sacred. In the 1600s, Benedictine monks practiced lectio divina, slow, contemplative reading where a single page could take days. Your rebellion is similar. Attention is the last frontier of agency. The futurist Buckminster Fuller saw this, calling humans trim tabs, tiny rudders that can redirect entire ships. Start small. Read a book from front to back, no skimming. Walk without headphones, letting your mind wander into uncharted terrain. Stare at a painting until it stares back. These acts are subversive. They retrain your brain to resist the dopamine drip of distraction and seek the adrenaline of creation. History's rebels prove this path works, but never easily. Galileo, under house arrest, smuggled out manuscripts by writing between the lines of official letters. Frederick Douglass taught himself to read with scraps of newspapers, knowing literacy was the slave's first step to freedom. Emily Dickinson wrote 1,800 poems in secret, redefining poetry from a solitary room. Their power wasn't in defiance, but in devotion to truth, beauty, or justice, even when it meant isolation. The Great Delusion? Believing you're immune. The educated scoff at flat earthers, but swallow partisan narratives with identical fervor. The spiritual dismiss dogma while parroting gurus who preach non-attachment from gold-plated thrones. Even rebellion becomes a pose. A Che Guevara t-shirt bought off Amazon, a punk aesthetic sanitized for mass consumption. You mistake reaction for revolution, never noticing that your defiance moves within grooves carved by the very system you claim to reject. The German poet Rilke saw this clearly. Beware of letting yourself become a mere vehicle for trends. And so we arrive at the heart of the trap. Thinking for yourself requires dismantling the lies you've mistaken for yourself. Jung's shadow, Nietzsche's will to power, Frankl's search for meaning, they all point to the same harrowing truth. Authenticity is a war against evolutionary instincts, cultural programming, and the seductive ease of living secondhand. It's why Soren Kierkegaard declared, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing." But here's the spark of hope. Jailers can be overthrown. Every system of control, biological, psychological, societal, contains the seeds of its own undoing. The question is not whether you're capable of thinking freely, but whether you're willing to endure the death of every comforting lie that's kept you small. The mirrors are shattering. The cracks are spreading. What you do next will determine whether you live as a prisoner or become something far more dangerous. You stand at the edge. Behind you, the ruins of borrowed lives, shattered mirrors, the smoldering husk of every lie you once called self. Ahead, nothing. No map, no creed, no savior. Only a vast, echoing silence. And here in this void, you hear it. The question that has haunted humanity since the first campfire stories, now whispered in your bones. What are you? The answer is not what you expect. You are not a thinker. You are thought itself. This is the ultimate truth. Your mind is not a possession but a process, a verb masquerading as a noun. The you you've spent a lifetime defending, your beliefs, your memories, even your name, is a story cobbled together by neurons and cultural debris. The Buddha called this anatta, no self. David Hume, dissecting the soul, found only a bundle of perceptions. Quantum physics now echoes them. Particles have no inherent identity, only probabilities. You are no different. The thinker is a myth. There is only thinking, wild, untamed, and ceaselessly reborn. But here's the revolution. If you are not a static entity, you cannot be imprisoned. You've spent lifetimes mistaking the dance for the dancer, the flame for the ash. The jailers, the tribe, the fear, the need for certainty only have power over a self that doesn't exist. The moment you realize you're not a noun but a verb, not a statue but a storm, every chain becomes smoke. This is not abstract philosophy, it's a neurological fact. Your brain's 86 billion neurons fire in patterns shaped by experience, but no pattern is permanent. Neurogenesis rewrites you daily. The self you were at 15, 30, or yesterday is gone, replaced by a new configuration of synapses. You are a river, not a rock, and rivers cannot be caged. Yet society depends on your amnesia. Religions sell eternal souls. Nations demand loyal citizens. Markets thrive on branded identities. All rely on the illusion that you are a fixed thing to be controlled. But the deeper truth, as the Persian poet Rumi wrote, is that you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. When you stop clinging to the shore of a fictional self, you become the tide, capable of dissolving borders, eroding dogma, reshaping worlds. But there's a catch. You must surrender the addiction to meaning. Not to nihilism, but to the understanding that meaning isn't found. It's forged. Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz realized that even in hell, humans could choose their response. This is the final freedom. You are not here to discover purpose, but to imprint it onto chaos like a sculptor carving order from marble. Existentialists like Sartre and Camus called this absurd freedom, the courage to create meaning in a universe that offers none. Now the reckoning. If you are pure potential, why have you lived so small? Why let systems define your edges? Why mistake the menu for the meal? Every moment spent performing a role, clinging to an identity, or seeking external validation is a betrayal of your cosmic birthright. The 13th century Zen master Dogen put it bluntly. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. This is not transcendence, it's surrender to the present. The Indian mystic Ramana Maharshi taught self-inquiry, asking, "Who am I?" until the questioner dissolves. Try it now. Ask, who is thinking these thoughts? Trace the I back to its source. You'll find no center, only endless space. This space is not emptiness. It's the womb of creation. Every poem, every scientific breakthrough, every act of love springs from this void. The implications are terrifying. If there's no self to protect, what excuses remain? No trauma to blame, no ideology to hide behind, no past to dictate your future. You are condemned to absolute responsibility. As the Russian novelist Dostoevsky warned, with great freedom comes great responsibility. But responsibility here isn't a burden. It's the ecstasy of authorship. You are writing the universe, sentence by sentence, breath by breath. So, what now? How to live this truth? Become a question mark. Not the kind that begs for answers, but the kind that unravels them. When you meet a belief, yours or others, ask, what does this protect? What does it forbid? When you feel anger, ask, what ancient wound is this echoing? Replace I am with I seem. I seem to be angry. I seem to need this. And watch the drama lose its fangs. Embrace holy hypocrisy. A free mind is a paradox. It can hold communism and capitalism in one hand, faith and doubt in the other, because it knows all ideas are tools, not truths. The philosopher Alan Watts likened this to using a finger to point at the moon. The instant you mistake the finger for the moon, you've lost the way. Be ruthless in your curiosity, tender in your certainty. Die daily. The Christian mystic Meister Eckhart preached eternal birth. But birth requires death. Each morning, ask, what must I release to think anew today? Each night, ask, what did I cling to that I can bury? This is not self-destruction, it's self-recreation. And finally, trust the mess. A mind that thinks for itself is a wildfire, unpredictable, dangerous, alive. It will burn relationships, careers, and comfort zones, but from its ashes will rise phoenixes you never imagined. Ideas that shimmer, loves that deepen, a life that breathes. The German painter Gerhard Richter said, art is the highest form of hope. So is thinking. You are not done. You will never be done. The mirrors will keep shattering. The jailers will regroup. The tribe will keep calling. But now you know the secret. You are the storm. You are the sculptor. You are the silence between notes where the symphony is born. So let them call you mad. Let them say you've lost your way. You haven't lost anything. You've finally begun. Don't forget to subscribe, make a comment, and hit the notification bell. See you in the next video.